Seeking to drum up support for Ukraine, the President Volodymyr Zelensky will be delivering a virtual address to the U.S. Congress today. Nearly 3 weeks after Russia launched the offensive, Zelensky's pleas for help to defend his country have grown increasingly desperate. He has repeatedly urged Washington, the European Union and the NATO for military hardware. And this address comes as U.S. lawmakers have ratcheted up pressure on the White House to take a tougher line over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The U.S. Congress authorized more than double the military and humanitarian aid the Biden administration had requested for Ukraine. The Congress has also seen as having nudged Biden to announce a U.S. ban on Russian oil. However, there is a growing demand on both sides of the Congress for a more assertive U.S. posture. Congress members have also raised questions on the U.S. not helping Ukraine boost its air defense. In a letter of support, they said, I'm quoting, with Russia's alarming disregard for Ukrainian civilian casualties, the U.S. must help supply more comprehensive air defense systems to defend Ukraine and its people. In a video call on the 5th of March, Volodymyr Zelensky spoke to lawmakers from the U.S. Republican and Democratic parties. Zelensky had made a plea for Russian-made planes. More than 280 members of the American Senate and the House of Representatives took part in the video call with Zelensky. Poland has offered to send Soviet-style MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine via a U.S. airbase in Germany. Fearing the move could escalate tensions with nuclear-armed Russia, the White House has rejected the proposal. Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to reiterate his plea for aircraft to fight Russian invaders. Joe Biden has repeatedly said that the U.S. will not send forces into Ukraine but will defend every inch of NATO territory. The Congress had earlier called for tougher sanctions against Russia. Volodymyr Zelensky will be seeking to drum up further support from the United States and address the U.S. Congress in a while from now. In that plea, Volodymyr Zelensky is once again expected to reiterate his demand for more defense, more aircraft to fight the Russian invaders. This is a virtual address that Volodymyr Zelensky will be delivering to the American Congress, coming in the backdrop of a tit-for-tat move on part of Moscow when it also announced sanctions against a list of American leaders, including the U.S. President Joe Biden. Let's go straight across now to our correspondent, Susan Tehrani, who is with us from New York for more on these developments. Susan, help us better understand the significance of this address, which will be delivered by Volodymyr Zelensky, and the expectations at this point.
Really, President Zelensky is delivering the speech, Molly, at a time where he enjoys bipartisan support by members in Washington on Capitol Hill. That itself is significant, considering the fact that it's very hard for both Republicans and Democrats to really reach an agreement and find common ground on an issue. But when it comes to Ukraine, really, we've seen, for the most part, a bipartisan support to really help Ukraine and provide as much support as possible, first in terms of aid militarily, of course in terms of humanitarian aid, and even at times, putting President Biden in a bind, if you may, to push further in supporting the people of Ukraine and President Zelensky himself as well. Although President Biden is expected to promise additional military aid, about $800 million, in addition to the $200 million that he has already pledged, which would bring the number to $1 billion in military aid later today to Ukraine. He will stop short of implying a no-fly zone against Ukraine. That's something that we probably expect once again for President Zelensky of Ukraine to ask for. However, the United States and its allies have said that that is definitely something that would imply an act of war against Russia. and they really don't want to get into a direct conflict with Russia in that case. Pretty significant also on what kind of other aids the United States is planning on providing to Russia. There is now talk that perhaps there will be some kind of explosive drones as well, but we'll have to wait and see about the details of that aid that President Biden is supposed to announce possibly after this speech and this plea, if you may, by President Zelensky to members of Congress.
Right. Give us a sense of the reaction from the United States on the tit-for-tat sanctions that have been announced by Moscow against the American leaders, including U.S. President Joe Biden.
As expected, this was something that was shrugged off notably by White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. She was asked about it yesterday during a press briefing, and she even took a jab at Moscow for saying that perhaps they were sanctioning the president's father because Joe Biden himself is a junior. They've played it down. Hillary Clinton played it down and said that she got a Lifetime Achievement Award considering the fact that she's not in office. At the end of the day, Russia doesn't have access to these people's assets, and it's very unlikely that, as Jen Psaki said, they would ever go on vacation in Russia on the one hand, but on the other hand, really it's an indication of how low relations between the two sides are, and perhaps moving away from the issue of Ukraine and how strained relations will be in the future. And I do want to say that, Donald Trump, former U.S. president, did chime in and say that perhaps now we know why the Biden family got something over $30 million from the mayor of Moscow. In private life, whether it's debatable, but these individuals under sanctions have had businesses in Russia. So that's something to take into consideration. But all in all, they did shrug it off. It was natural that they would. And we'll have to wait and see if Russia is able to maybe forge some kind of alliances with countries like China. And then we'll have to talk about the issue of these sanctions really being meaningful against these individuals or even corporations inside the United States.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.